Well, hello, everybody. Welcome to this month's DevSecOps Bunch, our monthly exploration into your DevSecOps pipeline. Today, we're going to be talking about AI and Copilot with a good friend, Omar from GitHub. It's going to be an excellent session. I think we got some sneak peek, too, of some interesting things that are coming out. As we typically do in our sessions like this, we wait about a minute for everybody to join us. So while we're doing that, I'm just going to remind you that we have lots of content we built up here over the past 3 years with lots of different partners and industry experts. We've talked about SBOMs, we've talked about CI/CD pipelines, we've talked about vulnerability management and orchestration and a zillion other things. Building security champion programs, best practices for running parallel pipelines, and all the rest. So we encourage you to take advantage of our long series of content. So with that, let's get started today. We're going to talk about powering security and DevSecOps with AI. Joining us is one of the more famous companies in the land of development of GitHub is Omar. Tell us about yourself, Omar, and what you do at GitHub.
Hey everybody, my name is Omar Quimbaya. I am a field security specialist here at GitHub, and my specialization is going to be on GitHub Advanced Security. So when we're talking about DevSecOps, I'm really focused on the sec part.
There you go. So I came from DevOps into Sec from the mobile world. So hey, we both kind of are triangulating in the space. Now I've been doing mobile and security for almost 20 years, dating back to BlackBerry. And on my journey, I got to go NowSecure as kind of the industry leader in inventing mobile forensics that then got into mobile application security testing, pen testing services, training, and a bunch of other things. We do a lot of security research. We build a lot of open source tools like Frida and Radari. We work on standards. I'll talk a little bit about OWASP and Google ADA today, and so on and so forth. We work with all the top technology vendors, carriers, and all the rest. Our customers are far and wide, much like GitHub customers. There are literally tens of millions of users of GitHub, and all of these organizations are focused on delivering high quality mobile applications at scale to meet their security and privacy requirements. So, Omar, tell us a little bit about GitHub and how GitHub's evolving as a platform.
Yeah, so GitHub is the home for open source. It is the developer favored SCM or source control management platform. So if you're a developer, you probably already know GitHub. I don't really have to introduce GitHub, but for those of you who don't know, GitHub is a developer platform meant to help design, create, and deploy software. And the direction that we're going is we're implementing artificial intelligence from large language models into the entire platform. So you can see these are the different pillars for our business. So Copilot's a really big one. Big emphasis on collaboration because that's how software gets built, people working together from all across the world to make sure that software works, that new features are built, and then things get deployed effectively. And of course, making sure everyone is productive. So we're using things like actions, we're doing things like code spaces and runners, and we own NPM if you didn't know that. And a big emphasis on security because we want to make sure any sort of code that we are pushing out into the world isn't going to be a bigger risk for our business or for whatever organization that we're working for. And then lastly, scale is that final pillar. We have over like hundreds of millions of repositories on there. Hundreds of millions of developers are working on GitHub on a daily basis. If you're wondering what platform scales the best, it's really going to be GitHub there. So I'm really excited to be here. And thank you, Brian, for having us.
Well, thanks again for joining us, Omar. And I think as we were preparing for this, we went down the journey of developing and building software, right? So I built a lot of software in the 90s around the early Microsoft ecosystem, Windows, Visual Basic, Visual Studio. Then we got into Java and so on and so forth. And when I was building software back then, it was predominantly you're writing all your own first party code, right? And so today, I don't think any developer would say, I'm going to write every single line of code and never use a framework or a third party. So today's code really is this blend of first party and third party code. Now, in my early days, I was actually one of the first vendors that created third party libraries, closed source third party libraries that developers could use to build Windows applications. Today, the world is full of commercial third party code, right, that you can use along with open source code. And a really great way to think about where we are today is that AI source code is really just another flavor of third-party code. So, there were times when developers were afraid that open source would eliminate their jobs, when in reality made their jobs easier. And that's what we see happening around AI and AI sources. Would you agree there, Omar?
Absolutely. If you ever were to talk to a JavaScript developer and you ask them, like, hey, what do you do on a daily basis? They're going to say, oh, I work with React, or I work with Vue, I work with Svelte, I work on some type of framework, I work in some sort of space within JavaScript. And oh, what time is it? Because a JavaScript framework just came out right now. And when I finish that sentence, another one just came out. But each of these different open source tools all form as or all work as an accelerant for development. They make developers more productive. They really help them move faster. But when you're looking at this from a security perspective, obviously, developers that are writing open source packages are not necessarily security experts. So, if we're looking at AI generated code, is that something that we should just inherently trust? Or is it something that we should treat the same as we do with open source code and closed source code? And I would definitely argue that we need to treat it the same way as developer generated code. It is something that developers are going to see and they're going to view and they're going to review and it's going to be tested. And that's something that we have to make sure that in the testing, that security does become a part of that. But it's just another accelerant to help developers become more productive, release things on schedule, release things as quickly as possible, and keep innovation moving.
Absolutely. So security is still a fundamental no matter where the code comes from, right? And
That's
that's
for
what we're
sure.
going to
Yeah.
dig into today. And you're going to show some great ways for developers to gain productivity through the use of AI, right? And so when I talk to my own team here and other mobile developers, which is really where I spend my time in the mobile development and the mobile security world, the ability to automate tedious and repetitive tasks, to focus on the more meaningful work. You just talked about speeding up the cycles. We talked about better quality. But the thing that AI doesn't conquer is the same thing that why is human creativity and ingenuity, right? And that's why, we still, even when, computers materialized in the 70s and 80s in the early days and people thought they were going to replace workers, they didn't. They just made workers more productive, right? Same thing's going to happen here, we believe.
Yeah, we're seeing that stuff like Copilot, for example, is helping developers write code about 55% faster. So if you could run, half as fast as you are doing now, or rather 50% more faster than you are doing right now, you are able to innovate faster. You are able to remove a lot of the boilerplate stuff that you're trying to do, or you're just getting suggestions that allow you to get over certain humps to keep you going. Just having the ability to work faster and smarter and safer does make a huge difference for developer happiness as well.
And so tell us about Copilot and the questions around security and safety that people have, because what the press is saying and researchers have been saying on the security and trust side.
Yeah, so there are a lot of concerns when it comes to not just is the generated code, is that going to be safe, but it's also the models that we're using, are those tainted in any sort of way? I think OWASP has like their own top 10 specific to LLMs. But the way that we do things at GitHub, for example, is one, we try to make sure that we use encryption in data in motion and data at rest as much as possible. And everything is going to be done using Azure's encryptions, and everything is going to be living in Azure. And we also do not train any sort of Copilot data on closed source code. So, we have millions of private repositories across GitHub. None of the models that we're using are trained on that code. It's all done on open source code as long as the licenses allow for that. But when we talk about if someone is trying to, use Copilot in a malicious way, how do we sort of filter those things out? And so we have infrastructure that allows us to, whenever we get a particular prompt from a developer, and that prompt will include the code that they're working on in VS Code, for example. We try to filter out things that are unnecessary or offensive or things that just are not going to be helpful for any sort of response. And then we generate about an array of about 10 different responses. And from those 10, we also have filters to say, okay, of these 10, which one of these is actually introducing security vulnerabilities? And which one of these is going to solve the problem in the most statistically accurate way. So we have filters and ways to prevent bad prompts from making things worse for the developer, as well as making sure that whatever comes out of the generative AI is going to be safe, and it's also going to allow the developer to continue to be productive. So that's how we are dealing with AI safety and making sure that our customers and our users and everyone is safe when they are using our AI tools.
All righty. So we've got the foundations of AI. We've got the foundations of AI and LLM safety. I will put a plug in. We're big on OWASP standards. If you're doing anything around AI and large language models, do have a look at what the OWASP top 10 for LLMs is doing as a project. It's growing very quickly and it's highly effective. It's one of the fastest ratified specs we've ever had and continuing to evolve. So if you attend our sessions regularly, you know we dive into the pipeline after introducing the topic. So if you think about your organization today, you're going to have some kind of diagram that kind of looks like this, right? So you have some set of development and company-wide standards. Maybe you have some governance and controls in place, depending on your industry. You want to make sure your developers and your QA team and security team skilled correctly on the tech you're building on. You generate requirements. Okay, I want to build something. What are the requirements for the thing that I want to build? You write the code, commit, build, test, rinse, and repeat. Do that in your GitHub repo. Eventually, you move to staging, deployment, and then you monitor in production. Now, depending on the type of apps you're building, the speed of this will vary. The size of your applications, the complexity of your applications will vary, but ultimately, you still have that core section in the middle where it's about writing code, testing code, releasing code. And today we're going to start with the view around how do you help the developer and drive this productivity. And that's why Omar is here. He's going to talk to us about AI assistance in a developer first security world. So I'll hand it back to you and I'll drive as you guide me along.
Absolutely. Okay, so if we're looking at this slide, the general idea is that Copilot is growing very, very quickly. Developers are seeing the value and being enabled in their ability to use generative AI to help them write code faster and also to help them write code more safely. But Copilot isn't the only thing that we're doing with AI. Within GitHub Advanced Security, what we're doing is, and this is something we're going to be able to show you in some of the demos that we're going to show, we're utilizing generative AI not just to provide you with fixes for particular vulnerabilities that are identified through CodeQL, but also help identify secrets that don't necessarily match a particular pattern, or they might be a very common pattern that would be difficult to differentiate via regular expressions. Oh, and also, if you do want to, utilize regular expressions to create custom patterns in GitHub Advanced Security secret scanning, we will have AI that will help you write that regular expression. So raise your hand if you absolutely love regular expressions, because I do not, because those things are like reading alien hieroglyphics. It is too much and it is just nuts, but it's incredibly powerful if you know what you're doing. And if you don't, here's an AI assistant to help you get to that point and help you and explain what sort of things are doing or happening with those regular expressions. Sorry for the tangent. I just had to hate on regular expressions just a little bit, just a little. So the next thing, the demonstration I want to show you first is going to be on our autofix. So one thing I do want to make clear, that even though we are implementing, AI in different parts of the GitHub platform, Copilot is one thing. AI inside of GitHub Advanced Security, that's a separate thing. You do not need a Copilot subscription to be able to take advantage of these features that should be coming out early next year, which I'm very excited about. For this first part, we're going to be looking at a JavaScript example of when a vulnerability is discovered with CodeQL via a pull request, what we're doing with AI to help create a fix for that particular vulnerability and allow you to interact with it in kind of very familiar ways. So we'll go ahead and get that one started. One of the new features that we talked about at Universe this year within GitHub Advanced Security is the ability to utilize AI to help fix vulnerabilities found by CodeQL. And this is going to be the first thing I'm going to show you today. So what you can see here, this is a pull request that I had made for this particular project. And if I scroll all the way down here, I can see that, oh, okay, CodeQL did not pass, and there's a particular reason for that. So I can scroll up and I can see, okay, so there's a SQL injection that CodeQL did find. Now, because there is a finding with CodeQL, then I can see, oh, wait a second. There is a suggested fix by CodeQL in AI. So this is what we call our auto fix capability. So whenever CodeQL rather finds a vulnerability, what we can do is utilize our generative AIs to develop a secure fix to address this vulnerability. So then as a developer, I don't have to go back and figure it out. I have something either I can start working with, or I can accept it, or I can deny it. So as you can see over here, I can go ahead and dismiss the suggestion, say like, you know what, I'm gonna do something different. I can click on edit and open up a code space, or bring it back to my workstation and say, hey, I'm gonna make a few changes in order to tweak this to make it a little bit better, or to do something different. Or I can just commit the fix directly in here, let that one update this pull request, and then whenever CodeQL runs again, it's going to say, okay, that particular vulnerability has been fixed. We can go ahead and move forward with the pull request. So currently this is available for Java and TypeScript in private beta, but we do plan on expanding this further out in 2024. So definitely keep an eye out for this. And just to correct myself, because I heard myself say Java and TypeScript. What I meant to say was JavaScript and TypeScript. I just think like those two things just kind of collided in with each other. So I just said Java TypeScript. Ugh. I mean, TypeScript is great and all, but goodness gracious, could you please make the JavaScript ecosystem a little bit friendlier for everybody else? Anyway, putting that aside, this next demo that we're going to talk about is the secret scanning demo. So how are we utilizing AI to identify secrets that, don't necessarily follow any sort of particular pattern that allow us additionally to reduce false positives? Because if you are looking at any sort of secret scanning type of tool, the biggest thing that turns people off are false positives. Hey, this is in my testing folder. I'm using it for testing. Hey, this isn't an actual secret. This is just a string that I wrote up or something like that. What we're doing is we're utilizing the context of those files as a means of helping us better identify particular secrets. Let's go ahead and check out this demo. Another thing that we're doing with AI and GitHub Advanced Security is improving the false positive rate for secrets and identifying secrets that don't necessarily have a pattern, or might be a little bit more difficult to find if you're just using regular expressions. So let me show you an example of this. So you can see here that we have our high confidence secrets, like the ones that we know are secrets. Either they're partner ones or they're non-partnered ones. But if I look at this other, I can see, okay, well, there's some other secrets here that, it may or may not be something that is clear. So there's a private key for an RSA key. But let's look at this Hunter2 one at the top. So you can see here that this was in a file, main.tf file in our infrastructure folder. And you can see that, hey, we found this particular secret in there. And so this doesn't necessarily follow a pattern that is very specific for that particular secret. But the key thing here is that, hey, we've been able to identify it by using artificial intelligence. So essentially what we're doing is we're feeding this particular secret safely into an LLM, and to get an idea of like, hey, is this have a high statistical likelihood of being a secret based on the pattern that you're seeing, based on where it is in the file, based on what kind of file it is, based on the things that are in front of it, and based on the things that are after it. And with all that being said, and all those tokens creating a solid prompt for us to be able to identify this particular issue, we get this result. And so for us, this is something we're also very excited about, and we should be able to see this, come out into a public beta at some point next year. So again, be on the lookout for that. Okay. So just to reiterate, the autofix and the secret scanning pieces, those do not require a Copilot subscription in order for you to take advantage of them. All you need is a GitHub Advanced Security license in order to take advantage of them when they become available next year. Super excited about that. And I know for the autofix, I did say, hey, it's for JavaScript and TypeScript, but we are expanding the language coverage as well. So we're not just limiting ourselves to the two largest languages that are being used on GitHub today. We also want to make sure we cover other languages as well, so everybody gets that autofix goodness. Now, for this next demo, what we're going to be doing is I'm going to be showing you how to utilize Copilot specifically inside of a code space. You can do this same thing inside of VS Code on your workstation or even some of the JetBrains products as well. But how you can utilize Copilot to change a file, to update a file, to make a particular vulnerability basically disappear. How to remediate things with Copilot. Let's go ahead and watch that one. The last thing that I want to go over is, potentially how can we utilize other AI tools in the GitHub platform to help us not just write better code, but more secure code? And how can we interact with it inside of an IDE? So as you can see here, I have my code space and I'm looking at a particular function, and this function has some SQL injections in it. They're pretty obvious, and this is just really for example's sake. But I can go over here and I can see, hey, look at this. There are some issues here, and I can look at, hey, what sort of quick fixes can we have? And I can select here, fix using Copilot. This is one way for me to interact with this. What I can also do is press Command I or Control I, depending on what operating system you're on, and write, help me rewrite this code to remove the SQL injection. And so Copilot in the background is going to take this along with other data points in order for us to identify, hey, where's the SQL injection and what could we potentially do to fix these things? And as you can see, it identified both of them, all three of them in this case, and then provided me, or not all three of them, but two of them in this case, and then provided me some recommendations on how I could actually fix this. And it was pretty quick. So in this case, I can accept these changes, I can discard them, basically I can move on with the rest of my life. But this is one of the ways that you can work with Copilot to, understand, hey, are these the things in my code base? Can I improve them? How can I improve them? Let's look at another way that we can do this. So if I come over here to my Copilot chat, which I believe I've just lost, here we go. And so I can say, hey, Copilot, tell me why I have SQL injections. So tell me why I have SQL injections, or rather tell me where my SQL injections are. Injections are. Oh, that's area. Well, it figured out what I was trying to say. And as you can see, it's providing me some code examples, and it's also going to give me an explainer on, hey, what's a SQL injection and where in my file there is a SQL injection. And then it also just gives me an idea of like, hey, how can I prevent SQL injections in Python if I want to learn more about this? I never have to leave my IDE. I have this AI tool feeding me information forward and backwards. I can ask it questions. I can figure out, different prompts to help me work with this better. And then at the end of the day, instead of having to context switch, going online, looking at different websites for potential answers or issues, I can just do everything in the IDE. I can do it inline. I can do it in the chat window. Or if it identifies issues, I can go ahead and hover over, click on the quick fix, and then go ahead and get that fixed. So lots of different ways that you can interact with Copilot, but specifically for security reasons, if I want to get a better idea of how I can fix things, using generative AI with like Copilot is a pretty good idea.
All right. So, Omar, any closing thoughts here? And then we're going to roll into some mobile security points from my side of the house.
Yeah, I just want to mention whenever I showed my wife that demo, her reaction was pretty golden. She was like, "Whoa!" Like her eyes got all big, and she was like, because she couldn't believe that this particular program was able to just spit out code one that fast, but something that allows me to just say, I don't have to think about this anymore. I don't have to go anywhere else to figure this stuff out. I can stay in one place, remain in that context, and not have to lose my focus anywhere else. It's really handy, and it a lot of developers really love it. I love it, and ever since it came out, I've been using it. Super excited about it. So I'll bring it back to you, Brian.
Well, thanks for joining us, Omar, and the journey you walked us through. I mean, as I talk to our customers and think back to my days of development, I'm not writing mobile apps very much anymore. But in working with strategy with customers, it's amazing to have tools that basically help you finish the sentence, tools that help you uncover the hidden meaning or the hidden issues inside that code. And so what we're thinking about here is that as you showed us working with Advanced Security and Copilot, right? We're working in a world where I've got my first party code. Now, of course, there could have been dependencies in it that had issues, and those could be raised as well. But ultimately, when we look at the mobile ecosystem, what we find is the best thing to do is to continuously security test your source as you build and the binary. Now, the reason you want to test the binary is the way to get complete coverage from first party and third party code. When you test the binary part, right? And the great CodeQL things that we saw there, which is testing through the source, is a key part of it. The other half of that now is you want to try to test the mobile binary as you're building it, right? So build it, test it, provide the feedback to the developer. And we're going to talk a little bit about that scenario here. So what we've been able to do in partnering with GitHub is to bring our advanced security testing for mobile apps written in any language or any framework, Swift, Objective-C, pick your other favorite framework you might be working with. And we're able to run automated assessments on any commit of the binary, right? So you commit your code, the binary builds, bang, we run an automated assessment, and we feed it right back into the GitHub Advanced Security console so you can see those issues from the binary running test that goes with the source code test that you're doing inside of GitHub. So as part of this, we provide embedded instructions as well. Now, we're not doing AI, but we've actually been working with coders for over a dozen years. So we have code samples for everything to help you fix what you're doing, along with links to Apple and Google documentation. That will help the developer who may not understand Android permissioning correctly or how to do cert pinning correctly to go back to the Apple or Google documentation and learn more about that topic using the developer guides that come from Apple and Google in the first place, along with our summary content, right? So what we're trying to do now is bring that automated scan into the GitHub experience. If you follow the link here on the right, this will actually take you to the live video version of this with a different person's voice. But I'll talk through this a little bit. So here we can see there's a Serif integration. That's how we're going to move data back and forth between GitHub and NowSecure platform. So I've got my app in here. I'm doing a build of my app. I run the build. I run the automated testing. I then find, hey, there's a verification issue that was found under my security tab. There's insufficient input validation allows untrusted file access. That is a more than uncommon. So this happens maybe in 30–40% of mobile apps that we test. Again, I can see the vulnerability, I can see the rules, I can go learn how to fix it, I can jump to links, I can understand the business impact. Although I haven't scrolled all the way down, you can see the code samples and you're off and running. So what we're doing together with GitHub is GitHub's working in your first party code and your source and the open source, and we're adding the binary run to bring everything together as you work on a pre-release cycle before you get into production. So what we saw today basically was advanced mobile AppSec scanning happening in the test phase as you build. You can do it on a push-pull, a commit, or a scheduled basis. And then embedded developer remediation coming back in that familiar GitHub console. We also integrate with lots of other ticketing systems, maybe using Azure boards or what have you, so we can provide that test output wherever you need it, route it to the right person, but give the developer the evidence they need, remediation guides they need, and so on and so forth. What's also really great about the way we built binary analysis is we have virtually no false positives. Sometimes static source code scanners can generate a lot of noise. The binary architecture we use with dynamic analysis effectively means we have less than a 1% false positive rate. That makes it really great from a developer experience of no wasting time. Now, it would seem like working in the GitHub repo with coding AI assistance as you go and advanced security built in and automated testing of the binary fed into the same GitHub console with remediation instructions would help you run fast. And it very much will. But what we've learned in working with our customers is there's other things you can do to speed up the pipeline as well if your goal is secure software faster. So I'm going to add a couple of other steps into this. Now, what we've learned in working with some organizations, I was working with a large automotive manufacturer, and the developers were incredibly frustrated because when they went to test teams, depending on which testing team they were working with, they actually got different testing results and they couldn't predict what the testing team was going to test for and whether their app would pass or not. So using that as an example that may live in your organization is make sure you get together up front, security, architecture, development teams, development leads, your DevOps team, and agree on what your policy is going to be for what defines a successful release. What are the standards we're going to use? What are the requirements that we have? What are reusable requirements we can use across our applications to make sure we understand with predictability to the developer about what's going to be necessary in order to release it. If you're in a regulated industry, this is where you bring in your compliance team. It's where you bring in your fundamental compliance requirements. That's probably already part of your governance model. Now, not all apps are created equal, right? So you can use a tiered model kind of approach. So our, multi-million user mobile app that does retail transactions going to have the highest tier and the most restrictive. But some of the other apps we use for like internal employee only inventory, they don't have to be so rigorously tested because they're not in the public app store and can't be attacked. Now, in a number of the strategy or training sessions I've been in, I often get back is what's the minimum bar for mobile security? Like, what should I focus on? And given our history of starting way back in iOS and Android in 2008 and 2009 and working with various standards groups and development teams and security teams and regulatory bodies, we recommend the OWASP Mobile Project. Fundamentally, the OWASP MASVS, which mirrors the web ASVS, is the standard for how to make sure your mobile applications are secure. It's got guidelines for architects, it's got guidelines for developers, guidelines for testing teams, and how to deploy a testing regime. So take advantage of that as kind of the cookbook to define what your minimum bar ought to be. Now, training is another part of this. I think Omar showed some good examples of just-in-time training. So, he's working on a SQL injection scenario. Maybe the developer doesn't totally understand SQL injection in that particular language. You can go get that embedded learning just in time. Well, in working with a lot of organizations over the years, what we realized is that a lot of mobile developers don't understand mobile security fundamentals. So we actually built a fundamentals of developing mobile apps securely and safely, and it's free. So we have a free NowSecure Academy where you can go sign up and watch a couple of 15-minute short videos that tell you how to do storage properly and network properly and use crypto properly and use anti-tampering and make your app resilient to attacks and so on and so forth. That's a great way to very quickly increase your skill set so that at every line of code you write, we don't find the vulnerability because you're writing quality code in the first place. So we encourage you to take advantage of that kind of continuous learning mode. Whether it comes from NowSecure or somewhere else, make sure you understand secure development fundamentals for iOS and Android. Now, we talked everything about the automated testing and the cycle in the middle that's your continuous operations. We need to realize the fact that automated testing doesn't cover everything. So you want to make sure you've got pen testing factored in. But if you're doing the automated security of your source code and the automated security of your binary testing in this cycle, then there's only a little bit left that automation can't cover, and that's where your periodic pen tests come in. So if I go back to that tier 1 high-risk application, make sure you're doing your periodic targeted pen test for that as well. And the last thing is monitor in prod, right? Things happen, things change. You might get active attacks in prod. You might have a third-party library that the new version is vulnerable, and you might have that version in prod. So make sure you're tracking and monitoring your app in prod while you're going through your update cycles. And obviously that will create new tickets if necessary if you find you have an issue, say, with a third-party library in prod. So bring it all together. Absolutely. Build security in, use Copilot and GitHub and the rest, add NowSecure for your binary testing and your dynamic testing, and then add these layers of additional optimization. And that's how you fundamentally get what we call screaming fast pipelines. Kind of it takes a village. So talked a little bit about GitHub. Today we talked about NowSecure Platform. We have a full suite of capabilities for you in order to make you successful. So, bringing it all together here, Omar, what does GitHub bring to the table as part of this holistic solution?
Yeah, for sure. Not just looking at things from a security perspective, which we have here, but we're talking about design, we're talking about issues, we're talking about deployment, we're talking about actions, lots of different pieces as a part of that SDLC. But when we focus in on the security piece of it, GitHub can help with identifying vulnerabilities in open source packages with Dependabot, with dependency review, as well as our submission API. We can identify secrets as well as, identify secrets that may or may not be, easy to find. We'll be using AI to help us with that. In addition to that, also provide developers with high quality information on where they are writing insecure code, and in the future be able to fix it for them via that auto fix within the PR.
Auto fix, auto fix, auto fix. Teach them how to do the right things. Pretty amazing. So when we bring it all together, right? I kind of summarized it in what I said coming into this slide is you get seamless automated binary testing, dynamic testing embedded inside your GitHub workflows. But we also bring that holistic set of capabilities around education with Academy, around testing in pre-production and in prod, around enabling developers to ensure they're leveraging Apple and Google documentation to write the best code that they can and be safe and secure when you release. We also bring all the data you need for privacy and compliance attribution, right? So we've got attestation letters, we've got privacy data collection where your data might leak, GDPR, CCPA, along with other compliance mandates to help you with FDA, SEC, US government requirements, and public sector setting, and so on and so forth. So that brings us together. As is typical in this session, we always like to tell a case study or two. So, Omar, why don't you tell us about TELUS?
I see what you did there. S-
Couldn't help it.
s- Yeah. So TELUS is a major communications and information technology provider in the Great White North in Canada. And so what we've been able to do to work with them to sort of help them with some of the problems that they've been having is, for example, they've had, multiple SCMs all over the place. There wasn't like a central place for people to work. There was a lot of different silos, if you will. So what we offered as a solution is like, we'll use GitHub Enterprise, that particular platform, and just congregate everything in that one place. Anything that's related to software development, put it in that one place. And so that gave lots of different people within their different roles visibility and access to what they needed to, look at and work with to do their jobs most effectively and help TELUS continue to move forward. And then when we talk about GitHub Advanced Security, it helped them identify not just vulnerabilities in their code, but also where all their secrets are within that code base. Sometimes developers put secrets in their code base. Sometimes developers put secrets in their commit messages or in their pull requests. So what we want to be able to do is say like, okay, where are these things? And then what should we start rotating and start dealing with? And then looking at actions and code spaces, it's all about saving time. When it takes so long in order for you to create with the release, to work with your code base, to, dig down and start working on boilerplate and all the different things, if you have the ability to standardize across the board and give people a standard way of doing things, then that just makes things move faster because you're taking away a lot of the guesswork, a lot of the figuring things out as things go along. And then with code spaces, hey, you have like a standard code space that you can give to a developer and they can start working from there. They don't necessarily have to, get their workstation, get all the IDs, get all the languages installed, all of this software development packs, everything. That takes a lot of time. So instead, here's a code space with everything that you need already configured and ready to go. Just connect it to GitHub Enterprise and you're ready. That makes a huge impact in terms of the amount of time, especially when you're trying to onboard new employees. So in terms of saving time, in terms of standardization, in terms of identifying security vulnerabilities, and just in terms of just visibility and having everything in that one place, really made a huge impact on how TELUS performs software development.
I think you have a quote here.
Yep. This is from the director of the digital platform at TELUS. And as you can see here, GitHub Actions saved them an immense amount of time. So for each developer, 2 hours per week, multiply that by 48 weeks, 250 developers. Think about all that money. If time is money, think about all of that money they're able to save by shaving off 2 hours per week. it's pretty intense in terms of the monetary savings that they have there. So, good on TELUS for going that direction.
All right, so some resources for GitHub users.
For sure. So, if you want to learn more about GitHub and all the different pieces of the platform, definitely check out our documentation. If you want to check out some like the new stuff that's coming out, we have lab.github.com, marketplaces for all the actions. If you need help, help.github.com. And then the bottom two here, CodeQL and CodePilot. If you want to learn more about CodeQL, how to use it, how to work with it, how to write your own queries, you can refer to that link. And then Copilot, how are people actually using Copilot? How can you use Copilot? What sort of things can you do with it? There's your documentation for you.
All righty. So I'm going to talk a little bit about Yellow Card. So Yellow Card is the #1 crypto trading platform in Africa. And if you're familiar with some of the economies around the world, Africa is largely a mobile first geography. So much like other parts of Asia, they never went to the laptop or the traditional internet route. They went straight to mobile. So it's the #1 app for crypto trading. And obviously, you want to protect your currency and coins. You want to trade safely. And so as Mika Katz was evolving their program here and making sure they had security built in, they were looking for a heavy degree of automation. They're a GitHub shop. They use GitHub Advanced Security. They brought in NowSecure platform for automated testing. They recognized they needed periodic pen testing for more complicated scenarios to make sure their users were protected. So they add that in as well. So they're a great example of that pipeline we looked at today that's leveraging automated continuous testing, pen testing as a service, academy, training, and leveraging the MASVS as a standard set as a foundational element. The OSPM ASVS is a foundational element of their world. Ultimately, the automation brought them what they were looking for, and the seamless integration of products make them successful. Some other resources for you. I talked earlier about NowSecure Academy. It is full of free training for devs and for security teams. Whether you're new to mobile and coming from web or a veteran in that space, we encourage you to take advantage of that. Quick link to have a look at our GitHub actions as well in the marketplace. And finally, we did a cool session earlier this summer that was building a simple mobile app with GitHub Copilot with our automated security testing running in it. So that's another way to learn more about the GitHub ecosystem and how we can work together as organizations. So with that, we're going to move into Q&A. So the Q&A box is open. You can ask questions here as we go. We have a few questions collected. So I'm going to look at the Q&A box here in my sidebar. Oh, that's interesting. So we'll go, Omar, of course, there's lots of questions about Copilot and AI. So first one's yours is, does Copilot use my source code for its training?
Unless you've written some open source code that has a permissive license in the past couple of years, no. So it is trained on open source code with permissive licenses, but when we are talking about private repositories, internal repositories, those are things that we did not use in terms of the training for Copilot.
So actually, this one's related. I'm going to jump on it for you, which is, can I train Copilot on my code base? So if I want to, can I train it on my code base?
That's actually something that we released or we talked about at GitHub Universe, for example. So there is this concept of GitHub Copilot for Enterprise. And the idea behind that is to be able to train an LLM on the code base and documentation that you as an enterprise have, and then from there that allows the LLM to be able to produce things that are specific to your organization. And so that sort of training and that sort of information is not going to be made available to other organizations and other companies. It's its own separate training model, and so from there, that just makes your developers even that much more productive and allows them to remain with the style guides, with the way that things are done in your organization, and to remain compliant in those sorts of things. So it is possible, and it is possible with Copilot for Enterprise. We also have another thing called Copilot for Business. It works on in sort of a different way from enterprise, but please see the documentation on Copilot on the card that we showed you earlier for that link. You can find more details there.
All right, looks like the next one is for me. Actually, the next two is for me. And so the first one is, what's the difference between GAS and NowSecure? So I'll walk my way through that. So we've been working with GitHub since the birth of Gas. Gas initially had no mobile app language support. Over time, GitHub has been adding some mobile languages on a source code scanning basis and an SBOM generating basis. What we bring is coverage for all languages, all frameworks, and we do binary analysis. So that allows us to test first-party code and all third-party code, whether that third-party code is private code, with third-party code is closed source, open source, or AI sourced. So we bring dynamic analysis at runtime into the ecosystem, along with some of the other capabilities like training and embedded remediation that we talked about today. We have a lot of mutual customers, and if you're a mobile shop, then you're going to be wanting to use Gas and NowSecure together. Second question, that's my direction as well. It's somewhat related. Is dynamic testing. What's the difference between static and dynamic testing, and does it matter? So static testing is evaluating the source code on its merits, right? So if you think about like a car, so let's say you want to go buy a car. So you walk up to the car and you walk around the car and you look at the car and you say, wow, that looks like a good car. Now, maybe you can see there's issues with a paint chip, or maybe there's a flat tire or something else. So like source code scanning, looking at the car, it can say, hey, you need to fix these places of source code. One of the challenges with source code scanning is some false positives that can be generated because you're not actually running it. The other issue is that source code scanning only scans things at source. They don't tell you what their behavior is at runtime. So dynamic analysis is runtime analysis. So that means you actually run the application using an automator that runs it. In our world, we run it on a real device, and that automator drives the application. Now, when you're running it, it's traversing all the code paths, right? It's activating all of the libraries that are relevant and ignoring the libraries that aren't relevant. So if it doesn't load a library or never passes through a library, it doesn't matter whether that library is vulnerable. But it also catches things like third-party endpoints you communicate to, where your data flows, how your data leaks. Does it leak on device? Does it leak into storage? Does it leak into an SD card? Is it transmitted in clear text over the air? Maybe you're not using proper HTTPS, SSL two-way communication, or your cert pinning is screwed up. All those kinds of things are what it will find. We benchmark the app stores. We find that 85% of apps in the App Store have vulnerabilities. 65% of that 85% are found through dynamic testing, not static testing, which means you should be doing static in the development cycle and dynamic before you go to prod. And that's why we come together. I think people are trying to understand some of the things you showed. So I'll give you the last question. What are features in Gas that will be enhanced by AI? What are the features in Gas that will be enhanced by AI?
Yeah, that's a great question. So one of the things that you'll be able to see with AI are some the things that we covered in the demos earlier. So first and foremost, if we identify a vulnerability using CodeQL, in a pull request, for example, we can use AI to generate a fix, what we call auto fix, that you can go ahead and edit, you can accept, you can dismiss, whatever that you need to do, but it helps speed up the remediation process for your first party code vulnerabilities. And then the other thing that we're doing is utilizing AI to identify low confidence secrets, essentially. So if there is a secret that doesn't necessarily follow any sort of regular expression pattern, or it's a very common pattern, we take context of the file, of the words that are being used, and also the string value, and then try to determine determine which one of these is going to be a secret, and then report that for you. So this is meant to reduce the false positive rate that you'll find in a lot of secret scanning type of tools, and provide you much more higher accuracy. So we're really excited by both of those things.
All right. Well, today has been a fantastic session. Huge thanks to Omar and the GitHub team for supporting and joining us today in our session. Today's been great learning. It's amazing to see the advancements in application development going back to 20 years, 25 years I've been involved, and what's happening now at Lightspeed with GitHub and Copilot and AI is awesome. So thanks again for joining us today. Remind you that we've got 3 years of these sessions. Please take advantage of watching those, and we look forward to seeing you in future sessions for the DevSecOps Bunch. Thanks again, Omar, and thanks to everybody joining us today.
Thanks a lot, Brian.